Paula, let me introduce Paula quickly. Who is she? She is an international speaker and she is a relationship expert. Paula is also an author and she has done a lot of radio shows, I believe, and TV, has appeared on TV, so well known in the media, I believe. And most importantly, she is an advocate for healthy relationships. And like myself, an advocate against gender-based violence. So we will talk a bit about each of those things that Paula is doing currently. So Paula, please just give us a bit of the background about who you are. How did you get to relationship coaching?
In my previous lifetime, as I like to call it, I was in the corporate world. I have a corporate background, working in mainly financial services. But I think like most of us, because we all have a story to tell, it was through my personal journey where I had a string of failed relationships behind me. And I was in a 6.5 year relationship at that time that had hit rock bottom. And we were going for therapy. And our therapist referred us to what is known as imago relationship therapy. So we went off on this couples retreat weekend to save our relationship, and I was just blown away by the impact that imago had on me and helping me understand how our childhood and our upbringing contributes and influences who we become and how we forge relationships with other people in our lives, both personally and professionally. And so there and then I decided that I want to teach this stuff because life is too short for us to be miserable and unhappy, especially in our relationships, which should be our biggest source of support, right?
So Paula, if someone comes to you, tell me, I know you work with individuals, you work with couples, and you work in the corporate sphere as well. So you do relationship coaching there as well, because relationships, we shouldn't limit ourselves and think they only happen between two people. You know, we have relationships with practically everybody we come into contact with, right? And including people that we work with. So let's talk about now the different types of relationship coaching that you do.
So quite correct, as you say, our whole world revolves around relationships. In fact, relationships is where we get our biggest emotional growth and learning from. But we're not taught how to be in a relationship, right? They don't teach us in school, they don't teach us in university. And then when we get into the corporate world, then we hear language like you need to be a team player and you need a network and you need to do all of these things. And then we get into a personal romantic relationship and there's no handbook to say, you know, this is how you make a relationship and succeed in it. So yeah, it's all about relationships. That's the golden thread. So first of all, relationship with myself. How am I showing up and how am I co-creating the relationships in my personal space and in my professional space? And so in the corporate world, it's about relationships, but it's not the language that we use in the corporate space. The language we use is things like soft skills, right? And I like to call them human skills because it's all of those skills that make us humans.
Yes.
And so things like team dynamics, conflict management, communication, behavior profiling, that's the kind of work that I do in the corporate space. Right. What's very topical at the moment because of the pandemic is psychological safety and mental health and well-being. And as you mentioned, also gender-based violence, unfortunately, because the home has now become the workplace and online has become the workspace. So from a workplace point of view, we've seen the stats spike where sexual harassment has moved from in the office to online. And unfortunately, with people working from home, people or companies have started to realize that some employees are not safe working from home because they cannot escape to go to the office to get away from their toxic situation. So that's the kind of work that I do in the corporate space. And then in the individual space, so relationship with self is around personal growth and development. And I've been running personal growth and development programs for men and women for the last 8 years, and then working with couples at various stages of their relationship life cycle, because we go through different life stages in our relationship. You know, we first
it's not
time
always
dating.
honeymoon phase.
No, it's not. Even though we believe it is fairy tales and what we see in the movies, totally doesn't. Totally not real.
And you know what I like, one of the things that you've already mentioned is helping a person understand the relationship with themselves first, because that's kind of like the building block, right? Because the relationship with yourself contributes a whole lot to the relationships that you build with other people. And you made an example of when things go sour in a relationship, you cannot always blame the other person, which I'm sure is tempting, because you want to absolve yourself of any blame, and so it's always good to blame somebody else. But owning your part in it and saying, okay, what is my part, what did I do wrong? Not again that I am saying that that person I'm excusing their behavior, but I'm saying, what role did I play in that? So I like that a lot, that you when you coach individuals, you also help them come into terms with the person that they are and the relationship that they have with themselves. Leading on from that, actually, I think this kind of segues nicely into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the issue of gender-based violence. And as a country, it's actually quite shocking. We are amongst, I think, the worst in the world. We depends again which statistics you look at, but one of the recent ones I saw was every 1 in 5 women, which is 20% in South Africa, will experience it in their lifetime, whether that's from an intimate partner or from someone they know, a neighbor, or whatever. But it's quite I think it's beyond concerning. I don't know what to call it at this point. What's your take in terms of why so much gender-based violence in our country?
So unfortunately, it's not only our country, it is globally. However, South Africa does have the highest rape statistics in the world.
Yeah.
Now, that is not something that we should be proudly South African about at all. And unfortunately, 1 in 4 women experience intimate partner violence. So intimate partner violence is your intimate partner, your romantic relationship. Yes. And intimate partner violence can be anything from verbal, mental, emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. Okay. Unfortunately, when we hear the word gender-based violence, we default to thinking of male on female physical abuse and sexual abuse. We don't look at all the other spectrums involved.
Yes.
And sadly, also, we have started seeing more and more men speaking up and speaking out about sexual violence and intimate partner violence that they are experiencing. And 1 in 9 men experience intimate partner violence as well. So we have to start looking at both sides of the coin. Legacy based, just because of history and legacy, and because women have been disadvantaged for so long, specifically from an economic financial perspective. They are more at the risk of being abused and being vulnerable, and it costs the economy huge amounts. It's almost 3 billion rand is lost to the corporate sector annually because of mental health conditions and stress. And underneath that, a large part of that is domestic abuse and gender-based violence. So we can't only look at it as it's not a gender issue, it's everybody's issue.
It's everybody's issue, yeah. And
so we need to,
you brought on an important point as well, that we are probably seeing an increase more now, because with most people working from home during the pandemic, I mean, the irony of it again is that, you know, the saying safe as houses, maybe I'm misusing it here, but I'm just thinking home is supposed to be your safest place, right? You're supposed to feel safe in your own home. But ironically, now it's proving to be not so safe for those who are stuck at home and, you know, cannot live for that 8 hours of grace to go into the office and breathe a bit. But now you're stuck at home with an abusive partner. And so, you know, people are now experiencing it more and more.
Yeah. Definitely. And so it's everybody's job. It starts in the home around how we raise our boy children and our girl children. It starts in our communities and our friendship circles. I mean, when last did you have a conversation in your friendship circle about gender-based violence?
Well, for me,
we don't talk.
I do, because I'm such an advocate, but I know I'm with you absolutely 100%. It's something that people don't talk about. And again, you mentioned something that I was going to go into, that it's also got a lot to do with upbringing, the patriarchal standards that we have to uphold. And again, I'm saying this not to say that men don't suffer, as you have already mentioned. Men do suffer, but the majority of victims right now is women. And so in a way, that too contributes a lot to what we are seeing. But you know, in my opinion, as parents, we also need to own that is what we have been doing, you know, raising our boys to, you know, feel like kings. And there's nothing wrong with feeling like a king, but there's everything wrong when that now means you don't respect other people's rights, right? What are your thoughts in terms of what can be done to help this situation? What can we do more of, maybe?
So I think there's a three-pronged approach. The one we've already touched on, which is it starts in the home. How do we raise our boy children and our girl children? So boys to respect women's bodies, and that it's not an ownership thing, it's not a right, and that when a girl says no, it's no. And for girls to speak up and speak out in terms of the kind of behavior that is acceptable and unacceptable to them, and to get the support that when they do speak up and speak out, that they believed, that they're not made the guilty personal party, which often happens by default.
Yes.
In our communities, we need to start talking about this more, so that it's, because the more we don't talk about it, the more we make it a hush taboo topic that, you know. And so we need to talk about it, so that everybody, the more we talk about it and raise awareness about it, the more people are willing to speak up and speak out about it and advocate for help for victims, but also for perpetrators as well, to speak up and speak out. We need to address both sides of the coin, because without perpetrators, we wouldn't have victims, right?
Yes.
But a lot of responsibility is placed at the feet of the victims to leave and get out of their situation. And how did you allow yourself to get into the situation, and take responsibility and all those kind of things? But it needs to be done from both sides.
And there's a lot of victim blaming as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So from a community point of view, and communities being, you know, churches, social circles, clubs, associations, etc., we need to make provision for both.
Yes.
And then in the corporate space, around our employee wellness initiatives, we can't be talking about mental health and well-being if we're not including domestic abuse and gender-based violence and sexual harassment. Because if someone is in an abusive environment, they are not mentally well. They are stressed, they are anxious, they are all sorts of things. And so we need to provide support. And again, in the workplace, both perpetrators and victims. Because if you have victims in the workplace, trust me, you've got perpetrators as well.
Absolutely.
So we need to provide for both. And then from a from a government point of view, which is a whole nother discussion, but we need the right training, the right resources, the upskilling, places of safety that can adequately handle, you know, victims and perpetrators. So yes, we have safe houses and shelters for victims, which are totally inadequately equipped and all of those kind of things. They're trying their best, absolutely. But we also need places for perpetrators to go to. We can no longer slap perpetrators on the wrist and say, there you go, off, go to anger management classes. It's unsustainable.
Almost like, yeah, you're making me think of like an AA setting, but for perpetrators, right? Where they can go and speak with other perpetrators and give each other support in terms of helping each other to, I don't want to say quit the habits, because that kind of diminishes. I feel like it diminishes it when I call it a habit.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. I mean, let's say nobody is born a perpetrator or an abuser. You become one. It's a learned behavior. So I always like to use the analogy of smoking. We're not born smoking, we learn how to smoke. If we want to stop smoking, we have to unlearn it and replace it with new behavior, right? Or healthier behaviors. It's the same from a perpetrator perspective. And when I say perpetrator, I'm talking across the gender spectrum. I'm not labeling that men are the perpetrators. I'm talking all perpetrators. It's a learned behavior, and you need to go and unlearn that behavior and replace that behavior with new, healthier behaviors. I think, just so two things. One, from an individual point of view or a couple point of view, is there's this perception that, a healthy relationship is we love each other, and we're going to live happily ever after, and we're never going to fight, and we're going to do everything together, and that's unsustainable and it's unrealistic. So it's about having realistic expectations. There's no such thing as the perfect person or the perfect relationship. It's how perfect can you be for each other, and how do you continually evolve and grow together to bring out the best in each other, as opposed to what tends to happen is couples tend to grow apart because they don't know how to resolve the conflicts that they're having. And then they end up going, well, we're just not compatible anymore, irreconcilable differences, those kind of things. And so it's a journey. Your relationship is a journey, and it's going to evolve as you move through your different relationship stages. And it's not a shame to ask for help if you're struggling. A lot of couples leave it until it's too late, and then they seek help. So don't wait. Think of your relationship as a car, right? Every year you take your car in for an annual service and a checkup to make sure it's reliable and safe and working. Do the same thing for your relationship. Have a maintenance check on your relationship. So that's from an individual plan. Exactly. Why not? And then in the corporate workspace, it's very topical. A lot of people are struggling now with, going back to work and psychological safety and mental health and well-being. And so for corporates to say, your people are your business. Without your people, you wouldn't have a business, right?
Exactly.
So take the time to invest in your people, because if they feel valued and appreciated, they will do the work and they will deliver on your business, because people go where they feel welcome, but people stay where they feel valued.
And so, thank you for that. Paula, quickly, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about your services?
Sure. You can find me. I'm on all the social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And my website is paulaquinsee.com.
Oh, good. Okay, that's easy. I will also put that on the show notes so they'll be able to find you. And Paula is quite a celebrity, by the way. She has appeared in so many shows. You also did Married at First Sight. I mean, really. So can people really be married at first sight, Paula?
Well, I guess, it's no different to arranged marriages, and some cultures still practice that today. For example, the Indian community, some of the Black cultures, and some of the Jewish community as well. It has been practiced in those cultures and as a tradition. So, I think it is possible. In terms of reality TV and Married at First Sight, it's not something I personally would do. I'm the old-fashioned. I like to date someone and get to know them first. I don't think I'm
Me
that
too.
brave and courageous to walk down the aisle and say I do to a complete stranger, but some people are. And I think, it's just because the times have changed, and where do you go to meet people these days? And people are willing to take on more risk and be more, risky.
Yes.
Um, and leave it up to the experts. But yeah, I think for me personally, I would prefer the old-fashioned way of doing things.
And this whole culture of instant gratification, you're right. When you are more old-fashioned, then you want to take things slowly, you want to get to know the person and all of that. But these days, the culture is, instant gratification. That's why we have things like speedy dating, I guess, and things like that. So anyway, thank you so much, Paula. We really enjoyed this talk, and I'm hoping that maybe again in the future I will reach out to you and we can have more on relationship coaching, because I really think it's such an important thing that people don't get coaching. You already mentioned this. Nobody coaches you how to have relationships, healthy relationships, let's say that. And so hopefully we will connect again in the future and talk more on this subject.